10 random magic cards rated, day number 89. Big question, did I ever let Ziggy out between today and yesterday's recordings? Yes, in fact, I did. He's probably stuffing his face. Let's look at number one. Card number one for Sunday here. It's Goblin Haberdasher. We do not cover uncards. I don't care if they have an acorn or not. If they're playable in command, it's an uncard. I'm not going to cover it. Pyromancer Swath is up next, originally printed in Future Sight. First actual card of the day. 2 and a red for an enchantment. If an instant or sorcery source you control would deal damage to a creature or player, it deals that much damage plus 2 to that creature or player instead. At end of turn, discard your hand. That's not great. I do see that this is still worth like 60 cents. It's only ever been printed twice. And I remember this, like very vaguely. I remember this card originally being printed in Future Sight. This is a set that I love. This whole block, I'm a huge fan of. Time Spiral in Future Sight and Plane Shift. But yeah, the card's not actually that great if you have to discard your hand, you know what I mean? But I guess there's ways of setting the card up, but I'm still not a huge fan of working to jump through these hoops. So I'm going to give the card a 4.6 and leave it at that, but I acknowledge that there's probably some stuff for the card to do, but I'll look at Baloch Cage Trap next from Zendikar. This is 5 mana, 3 and 2 green for an instant. It is a trap. If an opponent had an artifact enter the battlefield under his or her control this turn, you may pay 2 rather than pay Baloch Cage's mana cost. Baloch Cage Trap's mana cost. Put a 4/4 green beast creature token onto the battlefield. So, okay. So if they play an artifact, they don't even have to cast one, right? They just look at a 1/1 artifact creature token or something. ETB's under their control. You get a 1 and a green 4/4. 2 mana 4/4. That does nothing else. It's just a beast. It's actually not great. Like, the more I look at it, the more I'm like, whatever. But your opponent will probably play like, a mana rock or something on turn 2 or something like that. And you can get this pretty easily. But is it worth a slot in your commander deck when you could be doing other things? I don't think so. So I'm just going to give this like a 2.9, but acknowledge that, like, your opponent goes to play their like Signet or their Talisman or their Felwar Stone or Mind Stone or whatever it is on turn 2. Like, you get a 4/4, but you have to skip the whole rest of your turn 2 and like pass on your turn and not do anything. And like, I don't know, that's probably not good just to get a 4/4. I think you'd rather just do cool stuff on your second turn, But anyway, Patchwork Beasty, brand new card up next. This is from Dustmore. 1 green mana for a 3/3 artifact creature that's also a beast. It has Delirium. It can't attack or block unless there are 4 or more, unless you have Delirium, unless you have 4 or more card types in your yard. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may mill a card if that's what you feel like doing. Pretty good, man. Pretty good, actually. I have neglected to play this in a couple of decks so far this season, and I've already had people ask, like, how do you feel about Beastie for this deck? Or that deck or the other deck. And I've always had my reasons for not playing it, but I do acknowledge it's a good card. Reminds me of, I think it's a Death Bonnet Sprout from the last standard. It just rotated out, and this kind of replaced it, right? That milled a card every turn eventually became a 3/3 that could attack, and it gets counters every other turn or whatever it is. And gets larger throughout the game. This can't naturally get larger than a 3/3, but it still kind of feels like a rogue elephant, but a 1 mana 3/3. But it's not actually a rogue elephant at all until you have Delirium. It's basically got a pacifism on it until then. And I don't love that, but it can still be sacrificed to stuff that wants you to sack an artifact. It can still be sacrificed to Bargain, Gleeful Demolition, and whatever. So I think the card does have a lot of spots in Standard. It just has to kind of find those spots. Maybe more cards have to come out, and we'll see if like a Delirium deck can be put together. But I do think some sort of Jund or Gruul or Golgari Delirium is more than possible with this card sort of at the helm. Both helping you get Delirium and as early as like turn 2, like turn 1 this, turn 2 mill a card and play like Overlord of the Baelmerk and mill 4 more cards, and like maybe you have Delirium and you can attack with this guy on 2. It's a possibility, but you have to get a little bit lucky for that to happen. But still, I do think the card is good, and I'll give it a 5. Just a solid, right out of 5. I think that it's right at average, and average is very good nowadays. If I was doing this series 10 years ago, average would be way worse. But nowadays, most Magic cards are quite good. There's far fewer draft chaff cards than there used to be. So, whereas this would have been a 5.3, I can, especially looked at in the context of cards like Deathbonnet Sprout that never really took off in Standard, I think a 5 is more or less warranted. But even though Deathbonnet Sprout could theoretically get bigger than this can over the course of a game and fairly easily, I think this is better in certain ways. It helps facilitate Delirium because it's an artifact and a creature, and that's a big part of it. I like it. I do like it. So I'll give it a 5. Nile Spellbomb is up next. I think I've done Nile Spellbomb before. Nile's Crane Spellbomb. So I'm going to move on to Gadget Technician here. This is 4 mana, 2, a blue and a red for a 3/2 Goblin Artificer. When it enters the battlefield or is turned face up, you get a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. And you can disguise this for blue-red, blue-red. So blue-red hybrid, 2 mana in all. Disguise is played face down, 4/3 mana, as a 2/2 with ward 2, and then turn it face up anytime for the disguise cost. So, I guess this is pretty bad. I haven't looked at this card in a minute because Murders came out close to a year ago now. It seems crazy, right? But this kind of isn't good anywhere but draft, so I'm just going to give it a 2.5. Sometimes a card like this might get a lower score, but this does put 2 bodies on the table. It's blinkable. Like, all that gives it a slightly higher score than just a crappy creature, But next is Sarah Angel. Oh, Sarah Angel. This is a 5 mana, 3 and 2 white for a 4/4 Angel with flying and vigilance. That's the whole card. Incredibly iconic. I think I have covered Sarah Angel before. I'm almost certain that I've definitely covered this card before. But you just can't say enough about how iconic this card was and how amazing this card was back in the day. This was one of the few win conditions in the deck, Brian Weissman's The Deck, which I really ought to do a video on at some point, one of these days. But actual next card is Nile, Nel Aeronaut from Dominaria United. I pass by this card on Arena all the time and never actually read it. 4 mana, 2, a green and a blue for a 2/4 Legendary Elf Scout with flying and domain. Whenever Nile Aeronaut deals combat damage to a player, look at the top X cards of your library, X being the number of basic land types among lands you control. Put up to 1 of them on the top of your library, the rest on the bottom in a random order. Then if there are 5 basic land types among lands you control, draw a card. So I have to have domain to just draw a land when this hits. That's terrible. That's really not very good at all. Like, it's not on attacks, it's on combat damage. And then if you get through that hoop, then you get to put a land on top. But if I don't have domain, the land just stays on top and I draw it next turn, which is like kind of actively bad some of the time. I guess I see why I haven't read this beyond a time or two, is I just told my brain it was bad. And I guess I should have listened to my brain because it is pretty bad. I'm just going to give this like a 2.3. It draws cards. Sort of. But Bogert Brood is up next. I know I've covered this card, and I'm glad I don't have to do it again because it's really nothing special. Snickering Squirrel is an uncard. This is going to be a new record for the most cards I've just passed through in one video. Thryx Sudden Storm. Now that's a real Magic card. 5 mana, 3 and 2 blue for a 4/5 legendary elemental giant with flash and flying. Spells you cast with converted mana cost 5 or greater, cost 1 less to cast, and cannot be countered. I love it. I love this card, dude. I don't know why this wasn't played a little bit more in Standard when it was in Standard not too long ago, just a couple of years back. I love this. I played it in the arena a little bit. And again, was just always surprised I didn't see more of it because control was kind of important back then. And this is cost reduction on big guys. It has flash. It's a meaningful threat in its own right. It's got uncounterability on, as soon as it gets down, it's got uncounterability on everything else. So I love this guy, man. I think he could be a part of like some commander decks that just play like huge dudes, up the beanstalk commander or whatever. So I don't know, dude. I actually still really like Thryx, and I'm going to give him a 5.1. I really am. I'm going to tip the scale a little bit, give him a 5.1. I think this guy's subtly great and should see more play than he does. Dude's awesome. He really is. This dude's awesome. Next is Atrocious Experiment from Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate, which is maybe why I haven't seen it yet. 3 mana, 2 and a black for a sorcery. Target player mills 2 cards, draws 2 cards, and loses 2 life. This is the only thing this has been printed in. I just feel like we've seen cards like this a billion times. Like, there has to be an analog to this. There has to be. 4? No. 3.8. I just think a lot of Sign in Blood effects or Read the Bones effects. This is Read the Bones. It's almost Read the Bones. It's not Scry, it's Mill. But, effects like this typically are going to be better than this. Unless you specifically want the mills, but like, even then, it's not that good. 3.6, it gets worse the more I look at it. Let's move on to Toledo Salvaje. This is actually from Time Spiral. It's Savage Salad, 5 mana, 3 and 2 green for a 5/2 fungus. At the beginning of your upkeep, it gets a spore counter. Remove 3 spore counters from it to get a 1/1 Saproling token. This is what all Thalids do. Sacrifice a Saproling, regenerate target fungus. So in Time Spiral, this is kind of a draft theme. We saw a bunch of Thalids because people hate Fallen Empires, but they love Thalids, and Thalids are from Fallen Empires, and Thalids do this. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a spore counter on it, remove 3 of those counters to get a 1/1 sap. And a lot of the cards in Time Spiral did that and then had an extra little piece of value on top. In this case, for your Saproling deck, you get regenerate a fungus when you sack a sap. I guess it's fine if you're using like the 2 mana Golgari Legend from Time Spiral that cares about both fungus and Saprolings. He's great in that deck, but like only in that deck, So I don't know. Regenerate a fungus is kind of okay in your Saprolings deck. And obviously regenerates himself. That's why he has low toughness and all. But I'm still not like in love with it. As much as I love Regenerate, I'm not in love with it. Much as I love Thalids. I want to give the card the honorary 5, but I don't think it even really deserves that. I'll give the card a 4.1. And a lot of that is nostalgia. We'll look at Pouncing Lynx next. 2 mana, 1 and a white. It's originally printed in War of the Spark. You get a 2/1 cat, and as long as it's your turn, Lynx has first strike. Normal. Totally normal Magic card. 2.1. And it gets an extra maybe 0.3 of a point there because it's a cat. That's the only reason. So, final card of the day here is Flaring Pain, printed in Judgment. This is still $3.20 to get your hands on because it's really the only actual printing of this card. 2 mana, 1 and a red for an instant. Damage cannot be prevented this turn. Flashback for a red. So damage can't be prevented is often just a throwaway effect that's worth like a quarter of a mana on a lot of cards, But I guess in extremely specific situations, this can be very good. And I do like that if you're milling it in some way, just mill it off the top of your library, and then you just got it in your hand at instant speed for the entire rest of the game for a single mana. If it's in your graveyard, it feels that way. So there's definitely applications, but the use cases are few and far between on this. And despite the high price tag, I think I'm going to do 2 things on this. I'm going to give it a 3, and that 3 is largely an acknowledgement of the very small use cases, but I'm also going to ask the audience, how do you feel about Flaring Pain? There's going to be at least one of you out there that's a real smarty pants, and you know exactly what this is supposed to do. But I don't. Like, like the 1 or 2 cards in Commander this is incredible against. Maybe Teferi's Protection. Does this protect in any way against Teferi's Protection, the way this is worded and the way Protection is worded? It's like, I guess you can get through effects like that. Surge of Salvation and stuff. You can probably get through certain effects like that. And that's neat. Or Turbo Fog decks or something, Like, again, there are use cases, but they're low. But I want to know. I want to know. Tell me if there's something I'm missing and there's like a deck that really wants this card or whatever, But anyway, that is all for the week, everybody. I will see you bright and early tomorrow morning. And in a couple of weeks' time, less than a couple of weeks' time, we'll be hitting 100. We'll have a little party for that. Hope to see you there. And I hope to see you there up until then, too. And after that, I just hope to see you here every day. I count on you guys. You're my friends. But anyway, love you. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.